I'll never forget stepping out that morning to feed my herd, only to see a spotless Bentley sprawled across my barn doors like it had claimed the place. The chrome still gleamed like it had just rolled off the showroom floor, and the tires barely had a hint of dust on them. Yet there it was, blocking the one exit I needed for my tractor. And, naturally, it belonged to none other than Karen, the self-crowned monarch of our HOA. She leaned against the glossy hood, sunglasses perched on her face, smirking like she was daring me to object. Karen has a rare gift for turning plain mornings into drawn-out battles. But that day, she wasn't just parking a car. She was planting a flag, declaring war. And I sure wasn't about to let some luxury toy decide whether my farm ran or shut down. Before I get into the story, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. You've probably figured out by now that I don't exactly fit the HOA's shiny brochure version of neighborhood life. My name's Tom, and I've spent most of my 52 years working this same stretch of land. It's more than just soil and lumber to me. It's legacy. My father built that barn with his own two hands, and long before I got behind the wheel of a truck, my grandfather was showing me how to mend fences and rotate crops. Back then, neighbors waved from their tractors instead of filing complaints about barns or livestock noise. But that was before the HOA crept in. They started sneaking into the community a few years ago when suburban families, tempted by lower property taxes, decided country life was charming. They brought their manicured lawns, granite countertops, and endless lists of rules. And at the tip of that spear was Karen, the woman who thought a clipboard carried the weight of a sheriff's badge. Karen wasn't your run-of-the-mill HOA president. She was the type who color-coded bylaws for fun, then went door-to-door enforcing them like Holy Scripture. The first time she came to my place, she wrinkled her nose at the barn as if untreated wood might spread disease. "This structure is unsightly," she sniffed, in the same tone you'd use if you found a rat in your kitchen. "It doesn't meet our community aesthetic standards." I laughed outright. That so-called eyesore had stood longer than any home in our cul-de-sac. It had weathered storms, droughts, and even a tornado. Karen's idea of heritage was probably a designer purse from last season. From that day forward, we were at war. I could feel that silver Bentley gleaming at me like a deliberate insult in the bright Sunday heat. Every soft shift of its leather seats as she settled, every tiny chime of bracelets while she scrolled through her phone. By mid-afternoon, my patience snapped. I walked over one more time, trying to keep it civil. "Karen," I said, voice steady, "this is your last warning. Move the car and we can end this." She glanced up, bored. "You're adorable when you think you've got power," she said. "I'll move it when I'm good and ready. Meanwhile, maybe pick up a hobby that doesn't involve noisy toys." That was the final straw. I didn't yell. I didn't start a scene. I turned and headed to the tractor shed. Sometimes words aren't the answer. Action is. And a John Deere's growl carries farther than any HOA pamphlet. The shed wasn't far, but by the time I reached it, my pulse had cooled enough for some sense to seep back in. My dad used to tell me, "Tom, anger's like fire in dry hay. It'll burn everything if you don't tend it." For a beat, I hesitated. Smashing her Bentley would feel good, sure, but it could pull me into legal quicksand I couldn't climb out of. So I tried diplomacy one last time. I returned to the barn, wiped my forehead, and pulled out my phone. Karen was still draped over her ride, likely posting pictures. "Karen," I said evenly, "I'm calling the sheriff. This is obstruction. You're stopping me from working." She didn't bother looking up. "Go ahead," she said. "The sheriff knows me. My husband's a donor at their gala." That fake little smile made my teeth ache. I called anyway. Deputy Miller answered, polite but cautious. After I explained, he cleared his throat. "Mr. Harris, this is mostly a civil matter. Unless she's trespassing or causing direct harm, there's not much we can do." I could hear the shrug through the line. The cops weren't about to jump into neighborhood politics. I hung up, feeling the defeat settle in. Karen lowered her shades and smirked. "Told you," she said. "Read the community handbook sometime." I clenched my jaw and kept my cool. "Fine, I'll bring it to the HOA board." That evening I went to their meeting, the clubhouse all chill air conditioning and bottled sparkling water. The board lined up like judges. Karen presided at the center with her queenly posture. I told them the Bentley had blocked my barn all day and that it wasn't aesthetic. It was functional. If I couldn't get the tractor out, my whole operation stalled. She cut me off. I only parked while contractors finished my driveway. Your animals can wait a few hours. A couple of board members chuckled. Douglas, one of them, tapped his pen and said, technically guest parking is allowed in shared spaces. This is my barn, I snapped. What part of that is shared? He shifted, uncomfortable, and suggested reviewing boundaries. In the meantime, could I be more accommodating? Karen smiled like she'd scored. See, Tom, you never adapt. Progress takes compromise. Progress, to me, wasn't parking a luxury car in the path of livestock. It was arrogance. The board adjourned with vague promises. I left with nothing but Karen's laughter echoing behind me. Driving home under the stars, I felt hollow. I tried reason, law, and the system. Every door had shut. The next morning, the Bentley still glinted in front of the barn like a smug sentinel. My cattle were restless. The feeding schedule was ruined. I tried one last olive branch. Karen, please, I said. Hands up. Don't make this worse. Move your car, and I'll help find somewhere safe to park. She lowered her glasses with a contemptuous smile. Tom, this is bigger than a car. Your barn's an eyesore. Your tractor's a nuisance. Maybe you should sell and move somewhere less civilized. Her words cut because they dismissed everything my family had built as disposable. That was it. The last ember of patience died. I didn't shout. I walked toward the shed, each step heavier. Her laughter followed. Run back to your toys, Tom. You'll learn who's in charge. She had no idea what I was about to unleash. The shed door creaked open like the start of some old showdown. Sunlight fell across the green steel of my John Deere. Dust motes spun in the beam as if the machine itself were waiting. That tractor had pulled plows, hauled hay higher than roofs, and yanked posts from the ground after storms. It wasn't just equipment. It was kin. I ran my hand over the warm metal, smelled oil and earth, and heard my father's voice. Problems on a farm get solved with steel, sweat, and horsepower. I climbed into the worn seat, twisted the key, and the engine thundered to life. Chickens scattered. Cows lifted their heads. Even the oaks seemed to shiver. Karen flinched and lowered her shades, her smugness starting to crumble. I eased the tractor out. The dirt vibrated under those massive tires. Neighbors who'd gathered at the fence gasped and pulled out phones. Everyone wanted a front row seat. I parked in the yard and cut the engine. Not yet. I wasn't rushing. I checked the hydraulics, tightened bolts, ready to load her. This was going to be precise. I wasn't about to wreck my John Deere on her vanity. Memories of hauling logs with my father and pulling a neighbor's truck from a ditch flickered through my head. This machine had always been my partner. By late afternoon, the air hummed with tension. Half a dozen people leaned on the fence. Some quietly hoped I'd win. Others were waiting to tattle. Karen strutted up, hands on hips. You're not seriously touching my Bentley, are you? That's a $200,000 car. Scratch it, and I'll bury you in lawsuits. I leaned on the tractor like I'd leaned on a preacher's pulpit, then move it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She was daring me to blink. She thought I wouldn't. I climbed in, fired the engine. The yard fell silent. Karen's face drained of color. She clutched her phone like a talisman. Slowly, I lowered the bucket until its edge gleamed. Don't you dare, she screamed, voice cracking. I didn't answer. I inched forward, the tractor rolling steady, each bump carrying me closer. The Bentley sat shimmering, emblem proud and smug. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was every insult, every fine, every board meeting where they'd laughed at me. I stopped inches from the bumper, the bucket hanging like a blade. Karen wailed something, but the engine drowned her out. I shut the tractor off and let the silence swell. You all see this, I called. This is what happens when rules matter more than land and work. She's blocked my barn all day while my cattle go hungry, and the board backs her. A few neighbors nodded. One even clapped before remembering himself. I started the tractor again. Karen shrieked, and I advanced, not yet to smash, but to make the point stick. The bucket lined up with the hood. I felt the crowd hold its breath. Karen screamed about lawsuits and destruction, but I was past hearing. The first crunch sounded like a hammer on a pan. The Bentley's hood crumpled, emblem popping off and skittering into the dirt. Glass spidery cracked, metal folded, and that pristine car cried under the pressure. Phones recorded every second. What began as neighborly nonsense had become something no one would forget. Lifestyles, wealth versus grit, exploding into a shower of splintered glass. I eased the tractor forward, the giant tires climbing up the Bentley's side like a slow, unforgiving wave. The car sank into the soft dirt under the machine's weight while the alarm screamed like a creature in pain. That high, keening sound bounced off the oaks and mixed with the stunned, rising laughter from the crowd. Karen lurched toward me, flailing her arms. "You're insane, Tom. You'll go to jail for this," she cried. The tractor's shadow swallowed her whole. For an instant she seemed tiny, her manicured hands useless against the engine's thunder. I caught her eye through the cab glass and held my silence. It landed harder than any speech. Then I drove on. The Bentley folded under the pressure. The roof caved with a brutal crack, leather ripping, airbags exploding into white puffs like surrender flags. I backed up, then dug in and rolled forward again, crushing what was left into a twisted, smoking heap. Burnt rubber and scorched paint filled the air, a metallic, acrid bite that mixed with the barn's warm hay smell. It was pure, unfiltered destruction, and it tasted like vindication. The neighbors cheered. Some laughed. Some hooped like it was a rodeo. One old farmer even whistled and slapped his hat against his knee. "About time someone put her in her place," he hollered. Karen collapsed to her knees, keening as if she'd lost more than a car. "My husband will ruin you. You'll be bankrupt," she screamed, but her threat was hollow against the crunch of collapsing metal. I finally eased off and rolled the tractor back. Where a gleaming trophy had once sat was now a mangled pile. Bent rims jutting, the hood folded like paper, dark oil bleeding into the dirt. I cut the engine, stepped down on my boots with a deliberate thud, and felt a heavy, stunned quiet fall over the yard. The Bentley's alarm sputtered out and died with a pathetic whimper. Karen looked ruined. Streaked mascara, crooked hat, voice hoarse from shrieking. For the first time, she resembled a petulant child, not a ruler. "You should have moved it when I asked," I said plain. The crowd broke into renewed applause and laughter, phones still recording everything. Karen scrambled up, shaking a trembling finger at me. "I'll ruin you, Tom. The sheriff will be here any minute." I shrugged. "Fine. I'll tell them your car blocked my livestock access all day. Pretty sure the law doesn't favor that." Her mouth snapped shut. Her eyes darted for allies. But no one rushed to help. If anything, folks were enjoying the show. I patted the tractor's hood like an old friend. It sat proud and oily, save for a smear of silver paint on the bucket. Behind me, the Bentley hissed and smoked in the fading light, reduced to scrap no more fearsome than a ruined wheelbarrow. Just like that, the balance shifted. Karen wasn't untouchable anymore. She was a neighbor who'd pushed too far and paid for it. As people drifted away, Deputy Miller pulled up beside his cruiser. He stood there, taking in the wreck, the bent steel, and the scene like a man seeing a story unfold. He let out a slow, half amused, half resigned, "Evening, Tom. Care to explain?" I spread my hands. Her car blocked my barn. I asked her to move it. She refused. My tractor needed out. He glanced between me and Karen, who was wailing in her phone, then at the crushed Bentley and sighed. "This one's going in the report," he said, but his tone told me he wasn't itching to throw cuffs on me. He was there to see what everyone else had already seen. I stepped forward and reached into my pocket for a folded, worn paper from the county extension. "Blocking access to livestock is a violation," I said, showing him the statute. "It doesn't matter if it's a wheelbarrow or a Bentley." Karen's face drained. "That can't apply. This is residential." Miller cleared his throat. "Technically, Mr. Harris's property is zoned agricultural and grandfathered in. That statute does apply." A buzz ran through the crowd. Some snickered, some muttered, "Serves her right." Karen muttered, "This is abuse," then louder, "He's twisting the law." I let her rant and added, "Also, I'm on the County Farm Bureau Board, and we've got lawyers who love this sort of thing. If you want court, we'll see you there." Her jaw dropped. the queen bee realizing the hive didn't belong to her. Deputy Miller shut his notebook with an authoritative snap. All right, Karen, I'm citing you for unlawful obstruction of agricultural operations. You'll get a fine, and repeat offenses bring stiffer penalties. He looked at me, softer now. Tom, file an insurance claim for the damages. From what I see, you cleared access to your barn. I don't see grounds for criminal charges. The yard erupted, some shocked, some cheering. Karen crumpled the citation in her fist, disbelief and fury warring on her face. This community will not stand for this, she sobbed. At first, she tried rallying the board to her side, but when Karen turned to the neighbors, something cracked. Instead of nods and agreement, she met folded arms and skeptical stares. One man called out, Karen, you've been bullying people here for years. Looks like karma finally rolled in on 4 wheels and a John Deere. Another voice joined. We're done with your nonsense. Maybe it's time for someone new to run the HOA. Her gaze darted from face to face, searching for allies, but one by one they looked away. The hive had finally abandoned its queen. I stayed quiet, watching her unravel. For years she'd wielded bylaws and threats like weapons, bending this neighborhood to her will. But that night, the law, the people, and a slab of farm steel had turned the tables. She stomped toward the mangled Bentley, kicking the bumper. You'll regret this, Tom, she hissed, though her voice trembled. I tipped my hat. Maybe, but my cattle ate tonight. Laughter rippled through the crowd, not cruel, but relieved. It was the laughter of people finally free of a tyrant's grip. Phones slid into pockets, neighbors drifted home, and calm settled back over the evening air. Deputy Miller gave me a nod. Take care, Tom. I'll file the report. But truth be told, I think this street just saw more justice than any court could dish out. His cruiser rolled off, and the last rays of sun cast the wreckage in a golden glow. Karen slumped on the curb, a toppled monarch beside the ruins of her throne. I walked back to my porch, poured a glass of sweet tea, and finally exhaled the breath I'd been holding for years. Still, I knew it wasn't over. People like Karen don't vanish. They plot, they simmer, they wait for round 2. What she didn't realize was that I'd been waiting too. And next time, I had more than just a tractor. I had the law, the neighbors, and a lifetime of grit she could never bulldoze. For now, the silence was enough of a victory. That night, the farm felt quieter than it had in years. Crickets sang, cows bedded down full. The barn doors stood wide and free. For once, I didn't feel Karen's shadow looming over my land. I rocked on the porch chair my grandfather built, staring up at the stars. The tractor gleamed in the moonlight, its green paint streaked with silver from the Bentley. Most folks would have called it a scar. I saw a medal. By morning, the story had already traveled. At the feed store, folks clapped me on the back, chuckling, "So Tom, how's that Bentley holding up against the deer?" I just sipped my coffee and let them decide. Not everyone was laughing, though. The HOA board scrambled to contain the firestorm, calling an emergency meeting. Karen showed up pale, frazzled, still clutching her citation like a prop in a courtroom drama. She demanded my removal from the neighborhood, repayment for damages, and threatened lawsuits. But her grip was gone. Neighbors she'd once cowed now spoke freely. A mother complained about Karen fining her boy for riding his dirt bike on his own land. An elderly couple recounted how she'd tried to outlaw their flagpole for clashing with neighborhood aesthetics. One story after another spilled out like dominoes falling. By the time the meeting ended, the board voted her out as president. The crown slipped, and the queen stormed off, muttering about lawyers. But everyone knew her reign had ended. I didn't celebrate. Honestly, I almost pitied her. Almost. Because what she never grasped was that power built on fear never lasts. Once people stop being afraid, the empire collapses. Life settled back to normal. The cattle ate. The hay was stacked. The tractors rolled on. Sure, the HOA tossed little rules my way. Trim this, paint that. But without Karen's shadow, it all felt toothless. The Bentley was eventually towed, leaving behind a scar of bare earth near the barn. I let it be. To me, it was a reminder, the day arrogance met steel. Every time I walked by, I smiled. Not because I crushed a car, but because it proved a truth. No matter how flashy the weapon, wealth and intimidation can't beat grit and stubbornness. One evening, a young neighbor wandered over as I tightened bolts on the deer. "Mr. Harris," he said shyly, "I've never seen anyone stand up to Karen like that. How'd you do it?" I glanced at the tractor, then back at him. "Son, sometimes you fight with words, sometimes with laws." I patted the hood, "and sometimes with horsepower." He laughed, but the lesson stuck. Weeks later, the air felt lighter. Kids' laughter echoed down the road. Neighbors waved freely. The land itself seemed to breathe easier without Karen stirring the pot. And though I knew life would still bring droughts, storms, taxes, maybe even another Karen someday, I also knew I'd be ready. Because my father's lesson still rang true. When you guard your way of life with honesty, grit, and the right tools, nobody can bulldoze it. The barn doors stayed open. The cattle thrived. The tractor gleamed in the shed, waiting for the next fight. On this farm, the battle had been won. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that standing your ground isn't about shouting louder or flashing more money. It's about refusing to be bullied out of what matters. Karen thought her Bentley and HOA clipboard gave her power. But real power doesn't come from cars or titles. It comes from resilience, from roots planted deep in the soil of who you are. Life will always throw people like Karen in your path. The type who mistake control for a right and intimidation for a strategy. But you can't let their noise shape your purpose. Whether it's your land, your family, or your work, you protect it with everything you've got. Sometimes you fight with the tools at hand. For me, it was a tractor. For you, it may be something else. The lesson's the same. Never let arrogance block your barn door. Now I want to hear your story. Ever dealt with a Karen who pushed you too far? What would you have done if someone blocked your barn, your driveway, or your freedom with a Bentley? Drop it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this saga of HOA drama and tractor justice, hit that subscribe, because out here, the stories never stop.